All right, let me see when we're going. And we are live and people are coming in now. So hello and welcome. My name is Hannah from Books Inc. And it is my pleasure today to welcome you all here and to thank you all for coming. Before we get started, I always want to introduce Books Inc. since we're all across the country these days. If you are not local to the San Francisco Bay Area, Books Inc. is the oldest independent in the West, and we have 10 locations in the Bay Area. And we couldn't say that we were the oldest, and we couldn't be as large as we are without the support of attendees like you who are all here today, and our lovely authors who come on tour or are local and stop by and support independent bookstores like Books Inc. So thank you so much for doing that. We really appreciate it, and we love our fellow book lovers. So thank you so much. Now it is my pleasure to give you the rundown of Q&A. I was going to jump ahead, but I remember I got to give you the rundown of the of how Zoom works. So you'll notice all of our attendees, your videos are muted or off, and your mics are muted. That is so that all the attention is on our authors today. However, if you would like to get in contact with Books Inc., that would be me. You can do so in the chat, which should be at the bottom of your screen if you're on a computer. And if you have questions for our authors, there will be a Q&A for the audience at the end of the event, and you can put your questions in the Q&A box and I will read them on your behalf at the end. But we have a great show, so I am going to quickly pass it off to my wonderful coworker, Rachel, for the introductions. And thank you again, everybody.
Hello, hi everyone. I am Rachel. I work at our Berkeley location, and I am our children's specialist there. And so I'm so excited today to talk to all of these authors and graphic novelists and just learn all about them. So let's kick it off, shall we? So the first person we're going to hear from today is Lauren Tarshis, and she is a New York Times bestselling author of the I Survived series, which has over 34 million copies in print. Wow. Telling stories of young people and their resilience and strength in the midst of unimaginable disasters and times of turmoil. Lauren has brought her signature warmth and exhaustive research to topics such as the Battle of D-Day, the American Revolution, Hurricane Katrina, and the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and other world events. She's lived in Connecticut with her family. So Lauren, hello.
Hello, Rachel. Hi, everyone. I'm such a fan of your bookstore, by the way. It's one of my favorite things. And when next time I get out west, I will certainly be there. So I'm amazed because before this, I was sort of in my days working on the 21st I Survived book. I've been working on the series for 10 years, which I'm just amazed by. And I'm still just kind of dazzled by the whole experience of being able to write about history and all the research that goes into it and all that I get to learn, because each book for me, unlike some of my esteemed, wonderful friends and colleagues who are joining, who I get to be with today, the I Survived series is a series, but each one is completely different. So when I'm starting the 21st book, which is about the Galveston hurricane that happened in 1900, I'm starting fresh and I'm doing tons of research. Normally I would be down there, on the ground, learning all I can in the city, but now I'm doing it, by interviewing people and reading letters and studying maps and trying just to soak up as much as I can. So the books are historical fiction, which means I learn all I can about the event, and then I create a fictional character and a fictional world for that character. But even the fictional aspects are very much inspired by what I learn, by what I learn in my research. And as you said earlier, what links the books all together is this sort of theme of resilience, of how do we get through really challenging events? How do we cope with loss? How do our friends help us? How do we help them? How do we all come together? So I'm just very thrilled to be here to hear from all of you. And the experience of watching my stories be turned into graphic novels has been, just sort of a very amazing experience. And I'm excited to be talking about that in a little bit.
Yay! Next up, we've got Varian Johnson, who is the author of several novels for children and young adults, including The Parker Inheritance, for which he won a Coretta Scott King Honor Award, The Green The Great Green Heist, which was an ALA notable children's book, a Kirkus Review Best Book of 2014, and a Texas Library Association Lone Star List selection, and To Catch a Cheat, another Jackson Green adventure in the Kids Indie Next list pick. Twins is his graphic novel debut with illustrations from cartoonist Shannon Wright, and he lives in Austin, Texas.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm like a newbie here. I traditionally write prose novels, but my first graphic novel, Twins, just came out in October with wonderful illustrations from the phenomenal Shannon Wright. And it's about these two twin sisters, Maureen and Francine. Before 6th grade, they're always together. They're members of the same clubs and activities. But then when 6th grade comes, and they start middle school, Francine starts pulling away from her younger sister. She joins different clubs. She goes by short name Fran. And Maureen is really struggling with not only who is this new person who claims to be my sister, but like, what is this new world of middle school and how do I navigate it? And what happens when my partner no longer wants to be my partner? The girls have a lot of issues and eventually they end up running against each other for 6th grade class president. And Twins was inspired some by my life. I'm an identical twin as well, 5 minutes younger than my identical twin brother, but also influenced a lot by my daughters. I have 2 girls, 1 9 and 1 6, and a lot of their mannerisms, but also their desires for wanting to see themselves in the book kind of made its way onto the page and into the creation of Twins.
Yay, thank you. Next up, we've got Maria Scrivan, who is an award-winning syndicated cartoonist and New York Times bestselling author based in Stamford, Connecticut. Her Laugh Out Loud comic, Half Full, appears daily in newspapers nationwide. Maria licensed her work also for greeting cards, and her cartoons have also appeared in Mad Magazine, Parade, and many other publications. Maria's graphic novels are Not Enough and Forget Me Nat, which were both released in 2020.
Thanks, Rachel. Hi, everyone. And I hope to visit the bookstore in person too someday. So I'm going to talk about Forget Me Nat, which is the sequel to Not Enough. Here, these both came out. This came out in April, and then this one came out in September. So Forget Me Nat is the sequel to Not Enough. And in Not Enough, Natalie sort of figures out who she is. She goes through some friend drama. She kind of tries to compare herself to all these things that she isn't and people who she's not, and then really started to settle into herself. And in Forget Me Nat, it's really a story about not forgetting herself, because poor Natalie, if you can see in this picture here, has this giant crush, and she ends up trying to change herself and her interest for this crush, and then kind of learns again that she needs to not forget who she is in this process. So both stories are stories of self-worth and self-love, and most importantly, self-acceptance. And really this idea of being more of who you are, and that the most important relationships we really have are with ourselves. So I'm going to do a little drawing demo of how I draw Natalie. And I'm going to break it down into little pieces. So, let's see. So there, perfect. So when I draw anything, I start with just really simple shapes. So I'm going to sort of give you the ingredients, like a recipe of what I use to draw Natalie. So I use a dot, I use circles, I use lines that go that way, lines that go this way, and then some little arch shapes like that. So with this being a recipe, I'm going to start with, I start with eyes. I'm not sure why, but in Natalie's case, it's her glasses. So, and I wore glasses like this when I was a kid. And both books are based on my childhood, Not Enough especially. All the terrible things that happened to her happened to me. And it's been a lot of fun to be able to talk about that, and most importantly, laugh about all those experiences. So now I'm going to add her eyes. So as far as I'm concerned, she's here. Oh, and then we need one of those little squiggles for her nose. So there's her nose. And then I'm going to use one of those shapes there for this side of her face, and one of those shapes there for that side of her face. And there's Natalie. And I'm going to use an arch for her smile. And then some of these kind of like these shapes on their side for her hair. And the side of her hair. And some straight lines. And then some more arches for her neck. Put some details in for her hair. And her collar. And Natalie normally has a heart on her shirt, so I'll add that too. Oh, and her eyebrows. So that's Natalie. And like I said, she came from a lot of life experiences, and I find a lot of humor at the intersection of fact and fiction. So it was a lot of fun to write these books.
Yay! And next up, we've got Andy Runton, who is a award-winning creator of OWLY, which has earned him multiple awards, including the Eisner Award for Best Publication for Younger Audience. The OWLY books have been praised for their charm, wisdom, and warmth by Booklist, and Wired said that they were one of the best comics for kids around, period. He lives in the greater Atlanta area where he works full-time as a writer and illustrator. Andy?
Hi, everybody. Yes, my name is Andy Runton, and these are the OWLY graphic novels. There's 2 out right now. OWLY is kind of a kind-hearted little owl, and really he just wants to make friends. That's really what it's all about. And he ends up in the first book meeting his best friend, which is Wormy. Sorry, that's my little dog. He is very needy at the moment. If you hear some whimpers. Anyways, so OWLY and Wormy, and they kind of go on little adventures. One of the neat things about OWLY is that OWLY doesn't speak in words. He uses a lot of symbols when he's speaking. And so it's a combination of words and symbols, because OWLY, it's kind of like OWLY's special little language. And it's really great, especially for kids who have trouble reading. That was me when I was growing up. I would look at words and just get overwhelmed. And I would, especially like some of the comics at the time, like the newspaper comics like Kathy and things like that, that had tons of words, would just give me a panic attack, you know? So when I decided to do comics, which is not something that I set out to do, I didn't go to school for it or anything like that. I actually went to school to be a designer, and I would stay up really late at night. And I lived at home, and so I would leave my mom these little notes. This one is a little, it's difficult to see. Here we go. I'll just keep it next to my face.
Perfect.
But so basically it's, what I would do is I would leave her these little notes of this little owl, and he'd be doing little things and having fun, because I stayed up super late at night, and so she called me Little Night Owl, right? And I didn't think anything of him. I loved him. But I didn't think I could do this. I didn't think I could draw comics, because one of the things is that even though I like to read, I didn't think I could write. And so I started thinking about what I could do to create a comic that I would have loved to read as a kid. And so that's why I came up with OWLY, with all of his ways of talking. And it all just clicked. And so they're kind of like my friends now. So that's what I do. So let me give you a quick little demo of how to draw OWLY. And let me switch to my other camera here, and we will see if this works. All right, there we go. Oh, we got a little tilted. Okay, see, here's the little notes. You can see it a little bit better there. See, so this is one I wrote for my mom for a happy birthday. So what I would do is I started drawing them, and then they got really involved over time. I started penciling them out and everything. And that's the thing I actually want to show you guys right now, is how I draw OWLY. Now, I went to school to do design. And one of the things about drawing when I was growing up is I would always get frustrated when I would draw. And so one of the things I learned was to pencil things out first and then to ink them. So I'm going to show you that with OWLY. So you just do kind of like Maria with the shapes, but I started in pencil first, right? And so it's just it doesn't matter how messy it is. And so I'm doing just the circles for OWLY, and little shapes, some little circles for his feet, and little cutouts. And then I'll draw his little wings up high, so he'll be real happy. And then little triangles. Now it's pretty messy. It's a pretty messy little drawing, but this is how all of the drawings for OWLY start. And this is how most cartoonists, when they actually draw, this is how they draw. And it's messy, and but what you're doing is you're planning it all out first. And then this is when the magic happens. What you do is you ink over this. And so what you do is you pick your favorite lines that you sketched out, and then you darken them. You can use any kind of pen. This is a little brush pen. But you can see I'm actually just tracing my own lines. It's almost like you're cheating, but you're not, because you planned it all out first. And then let's see. So it can get confusing because you don't want to pick any of the wrong lines. So you want to do the shapes that are in front first. And you can still make mistakes. And then you can come in and use whiteout on them or anything like that if you want to. Draw a little grass. When he's real happy, and then you just sign it when you're happy with it. But see how I planned it all out, and then when you get it all inked, it looks like, you know, you were magic, but not really. And so if you squint your eyes at it, you won't even see the pencil lines. But that's the beauty of making comics. So when we're creating our comics, we're basically doing that 100,000 times, right, per per book. But that's what makes it work. That's what makes it work.
Yay! And
Yay.
lastly, we've got Tui T. Sutherland, who's the author of New York Times and USA Today bestselling Wings of Fire series, the Menagerie series, and Pet Trouble series, as well as a contributing author, the bestselling Spirit Animals and Seekers series as part of the Aaron Hunter team. In 2009, she was the 2-day champion of Jeopardy! She lives in Massachusetts with her wonderful husband and 2 awesome sons. Tweet.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's very exciting to be here, and thank you to Books Inc. I'm excited to be here with all these authors that I personally love so much. So this is very exciting. Like you said, I'm the author of Wings of Fire. So they originally started as a series of full-length prose novels, and these are still going. 10 years later, which is crazy. I remember I wrote the outlines for the first 5 right before my son was born, and he's 10 now, almost 11. Oh my gosh. So it feels like it's been a long journey, but I'm still loving working on them. The 14th book in the series is coming out in March 2nd. And then after the series had been going for a while, we decided to turn them into graphic novels as well. So for instance, this book, the first book in the prose series, got turned into this, the first graphic novel. And it's been a really cool, really weird, exciting process because there's so many more people involved, which has been kind of fun to watch because so we actually have someone who helps me translate it from a prose book to a graphic novel script, and his name is Barry Deutsch, and he actually writes graphic novels too. He wrote a trilogy called Hereville, which is extremely funny and wonderful, and I highly recommend it. And what he does is he goes through the book and writes out a script that looks more almost like a movie script, but it's like a panel by panel description with dialogue. So I could kind of see what a graphic novel script should look like. And he will also give lots of suggestions for what the art could look like. And sometimes it's very specific. And sometimes he's like, Mike, there's a fight scene. Now there should be 5 panels of dragons fighting each other. And the most important things are like these 3 moments, but then you can make the rest however you want. And then it goes to Mike Holmes, who is amazing. He's done a whole bunch of other things. He's also the illustrator for the Secret Coders series by Jean Luen Yang, which is amazing. Those books are also great, and I highly recommend them. But then he takes the script and he does sketches, which I get to look at, and then the detailed black and white inks. And then it goes to a third person, which is Marta Lejo, and she adds all the colors. And I must admit, that's my favorite stage because suddenly everything gets really pretty and really shiny, especially in the third book, which is the one that came out most recently. Because in this one, they go to the rainforest and you get to meet all the rainforest dragons who can change their scales like chameleons. So they're all different colors. And also there are little tiny pet sloths all the way through this book because the dragons in this particular kingdom have pet sloths. And that's one of my favorite things about it. And the 4th book of the graphic novels is coming out December 29th. So just in time to miss Christmas, but you know it's coming. So you have it to look forward to. And I'm really excited about that one too. It's interesting to be going back and doing the books in graphic novel form because just seeing like how they can be interpreted by different people and also realizing how dark some of them are. They don't seem as dark when I'm reading them, but when I see them on the page, I'm like, ooh, maybe a little less gore, maybe a little less gore. maybe we can have that happen off screen and just have the dragons be like, whoa. Like there's a scene in book 1 where the very first human you meet actually gets his head bitten off by a dragon. And I was like, how about in the graphic novel, he just runs away really fast. So he saved a human there. But the whole point of the books is to have adventures from a dragon's point of view. So it's a whole world full of dragons where it starts with a prophecy and these 5 little tiny dragons who are the heroes of the prophecy, and their mission or their destiny is to save the world, but they're not sure that they want to, they're not sure that like that's the destiny for them, or they each react a little differently. Like one is saying, I don't know if I'm the right dragon for this. And one is like, excuse me, I'm the boss of my own destiny. I'll save the world if I feel like it. And then of course, there's at least one, book 5, which is the next one we're working on, who is like, yay, I get to save the world. I'm very excited. So, it's been really fun to work on these. And I'm hoping that we can keep going with the graphic novels, because it's been just amazing to see Mike and Marta interpret the dragons and make them all full color and beautiful and shiny. So yeah, that's Wings of Fire.
That's fascinating for me to hear about the collaborative, like perspective of what's going on with all your books, especially making adaptations of all of your books. I was wondering, Lauren, how does the process work with adapting your text from your novels?
And so I was listening to Tui and going and nodding and thinking, it's the same thing. So I too have had this wonderful collaboration with the team at Graphics and my wonderful editor, Katie Weir, who is, just watches over every detail of these books as they're being translated into graphic novels. And for me, it's almost like watching them be turned into movies, because we also have a scriptwriter, an amazing woman named Georgia Ball, who somehow takes my stories, just like Tui was saying, takes a story that, are very complicated, often very dark. I had the same experience of like, oh dear, no. And she does the same thing. She storyboards them out. And then we have, for the first 3 graphic novels, for the first 2, Titanic and the Shark Attack graphic novel, they're done by this wonderful team of artists from Argentina, House Studio. And then the 3rd one, which is coming out, is by an amazing artist. Georgia has written the script, but it's Alvaro Saraseco. And so I think it's a little different from, probably Tui and I have similar experiences of, of collaborating with the script stage of, really of watching our stories get interpreted into this new format. And then for me, it's also challenging because there's a lot of times such complicated history in my books. And one of the things that I try to do in I Survived is take these super complicated stories and concepts. It could be how sometimes it's the scientific concept of how a volcano erupts, or sometimes it's kind of boring. Why did we, what was the background of the Revolutionary War? And then to translate that in a book into something that's exciting and clear for kids. So now we have to do that in the graphic novel. So I think, Rachel, the collaboration for me, a lot of it boils down to helping, making sure that all those historical concepts and details get translated. But for me, it's just been an incredible experience of watching my characters and these stories that I work so hard to create. I wish I was like Andy and Maria, just whip it up, it's just it's like magic. It's totally like magic when I see these. I always start to cry when I see the first sketches, because they're just so beautiful. So it has been an unexpected adventure that I've loved.
And now that we're talking about processes and how things turn into graphic novels, Varian, you've written so many warming books for kids that aren't graphic novels. Can you talk a little bit about how the writing process is different, writing text for a graphic novel?
Sure. I thought it was going to be just like writing any of my other books, and it's similar in some ways, and it's not in others. I am a big reviser. I revise a lot. I do bunches of different drafts, and so a book like The Parker Inheritance went through, I think, 15 different drafts, but like Twins went through 13 different drafts, because I'm always going through and revising it and trying to make it better. The issue is, usually when I'm writing a book, it's usually my editor doesn't see the book until draft 3 or 4. And here for Twins, Shannon is not only seeing the first draft, but she's seeing the draft as I'm creating it. We really wanted a collaborative process. I was kind of dragged into a collaborative process. I was very protective of my process and wanting you to have it all down, but it really made for this great project because she could see it and she can make comments on things that she thought would work well and how she might interpret those on the page. And then that would influence some of my decisions later on as I was writing the book, thinking about what are Shannon's strengths, how do I lean into those? But yeah, it also just took a while to figure out how to do a script. Similar to the others, I write my graphic novels and it almost looks like a movie script, and it's kind of sitting on the page. I use movie script software to write it. And it's just easier for me to read that way. And I had to kind of figure out the balance of figuring out what to say on there to give Shannon enough direction on what should happen, versus leaving her enough freedom to add her vision to the story as well too. We really want to have two visions coming together, not one overpowering someone else's creativity. We really see ourselves as co-collaborators on this, with the words and the art coming together to make something even better.
That's great. And then I wanted to, speaking of processes and everything, Maria and Andy, since you do both your writing and your illustrating, I was wondering sort of where do you start? Do you start with your text or your illustration or kind of both? Maria, do you want to answer first?
Sure. So for me, well, let me start. I start with an outline and that serves as a roadmap. And I go through draft and draft and draft and draft of the outline. And then I sort of do a writing drawing process simultaneously. I can't really think of, I've always been visual and I sort of think them together. And actually I have an example here since we could do show and tell. I also like Andy work in pencil. Let's see if this doesn't use a glare. So here's some really, really rough drawings. And I like to put them in this notebook so I can see a book. And then this goes through revision after revision after revision. And then once we get to the final, then I go through an ink. But I tend to, even when I draw my comics, I sort of have a loose idea of the words, but it's really that writing drawing process that gets me, it like tells me the dialogue, excuse me, and shows me what the characters are. And then I have some, for Not Enough and Forget Me Not, I painted both by hand. So here's the artwork of that. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. And these are watercolored. Wow. So after the ink, so I paint them. I know I work 11 by 14 and then shrink it down because I like, it sort of compresses the work a little bit. But I'm working now on book 3, Absolutely Now, which is coming out next summer. And that I actually moved to digital and I'm working that on in Procreate on an iPad Pro. So, but same thing, writing, drawing, same process, just a digital version with very loose pencils and then inking and then coloring and all that. So.
That's fascinating. And then Andy, you want to talk a little about your process?
Yeah, so the funny thing is I've tried, again, I didn't go to school for this. I went to school to do visual things. And so when it came to writing stories, I really didn't know. I mean, I'd written stuff in school and things, but I had never really done anything like this. So what I do is I do something a little bit different. I kind of just talk the story through and I just kind of explain it, you know, and like, it's funny when you're, yeah, it's a little hard when there's not people around, but when you're talking to somebody and you can see them kind of drifting away from you, you realize, okay, this story isn't working, you know, and it's really important to be able to kind of tell the story in a way that is engaging. And so once I find a story, and I usually do this with my mom, is I usually just tell her this story, and that really is the beginning of it. And then what I do is I just sit down and I start drawing. I just start drawing all the little panels, and I just kind of I don't draw all the little boundaries or anything like that. I just kind of draw all these little drawings and like kind of in my mind, kind of like a movie, like visual, like storyboarding it out, right, is what I'm doing. And then what I do is I take all those little sketches and I scan them into the computer, and then I arrange them the way I want the story to be. And it's still incredibly rough, but at that point, that's when I start showing it to editors and things like that, because it took a while, but now they can read my sketches and kind of see how the story is going to flow. And so that's what we're really looking at, is like, does it work? Does the story still work? And then at this point, this is the easiest time to make changes, right? Because it's just pencil, nothing crazy is done or anything like that. And so then what I do is then once the sketches are approved and everything like that, I start inking it. And so I ink, these are some of my inks. Yeah, so by hand, I ink by hand. So this is all just like inks, but I work small. These are 8.5 by 11. And so every page of this is all inked, and it takes an incredible amount of time to ink the drawings, but it's all done by hand, right? And so there's just pencil and ink and everything like that. And then I scan that in, and then I color it in the computer, and I make changes, and I add, the writing is all mine, but it's done in the computer because it's a lot easier to make changes. I used to do all of my lettering by hand, and that is not fun. And and if there's any mistake, you have to draw it again by hand and then scan it in and cut that little piece out. It's not worth it. And so in fact, some of the OWLY books have been translated, and so I couldn't hand letter those. I had to make a font of my hand lettering. And so but it's all a very tactile and hand done process, just like everybody. It's and it takes a lot of work, but it's neat. It's actually my favorite part is the creation process, the early part, coming up with it, making sure it's all good, and then after that you're kind of refining it bit by bit. But yeah, it's neat to hear everybody's way of doing it is different. It's fun. There's no wrong way. There's no wrong way to do it.
Yeah, it is super neat to hear that everybody has very different creation process and a very different process. I was wondering, what's one of everybody's favorite part of being a graphic novelist? Maria, do you want to touch on that?
Sure. It really, all of it. I like every part of the process. I like the idea creation, and I don't know if we can see this. If you can see that craziness right there.
Whoa.
That's me
Post-its.
fleshing out another story. I realized on the last book I was working on that I sometimes need to see things big and move them around. So that's just the very beginning of me coming up with parts of an idea, and then that will go into an outline, and then into that outline will go as the other steps. But I love every step, and I think I can't say my favorite, but I also get to the end when it's all done, and then the little tweaks and polishes. I really like that too. And that's literally the icing on the cake. There's a huge sense of relief after you've done months and months and months of work to go in there and do the final little tweak this. And I would change it for the rest of my life. They have to, at some point, they have to take it away because I could noodle forever. So pretty much all of it.
Great. Varian, what about you?
I love all of it. I love seeing the images. I will say Twins gave me a great opportunity to really highlight diversity and inclusion. That's always been important to me. It's important to most of us. And I realized graphic novels gave me a way to do that, kind of like a diversity 3.0. So you're not just seeing, characters and understanding who they are by the words or by the cover. Now we have it like page by page by page. And so when we created Maureen and Francine's friends, it was really important for me for them to be brown kids as well, brown girls. I just don't think we have enough of them in graphic novels for sure. And that's something that my daughters really wanted. They love graphic novels, and they were a little, I don't want to say frustrated. Maybe I was more frustrated than them, but you always want to see yourself exist on the page. You always want to be the hero of the story. And it was frustrating that we couldn't find that. So this gave me an opportunity to bring that to life via books. And also Shannon's just been so amazing to work with. It was really important for me to have a woman of color as a creator on this as well too, especially a Black woman who really understands what it means to be a Black girl. And so all of that kind of behind the scenes stuff just felt so gratifying when it paid off with such a lovely book.
Yeah, that's so great. And we definitely need more diversity in graphic novels and all kids' books and all books. And then Andy, what's your favorite part?
I think the early part is my favorite part because as it gets towards the end, it is whew, it is tough as the deadline is approaching and you have, you know, hundreds of pages to color. And, you know, the story is done, you know, the story is done. You're just basically refining it. And it's amazing to see it come to life. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. But as it gets down to the end like that, you just want it to, it's the darkest part for me of the creation process, is just at the very end. And then when it's done, you're just like, oh my gosh, thank goodness. But I think, so the early part and then the second part that is my favorite is sharing it with people. I think that is the most exciting thing, is because, you know, this is something that you created. I mean, and this is something, it makes sense to me, and but to see it resonate with other people and for them to reach out to you and tell you how much it affected them, and to love the characters that you created, I think that is that's something just next level. You know, that's probably the icing for me, for sure.
Awesome. Tell me about you.
Yeah, it's kind of all the same things everybody said. I mean, in my house, I have two little boys, well, not so little anymore. One of them's almost as tall as me, who are obsessed with graphic novels. Like, it's their favorite thing. And so I read a lot of them too, and I love them. And I like that it's, I like sort of learning about the difference between telling a story with just words and telling a story with words and pictures. I was an art history major. And so there's a part of me that's, although I can't draw at all, so I could never be the person like bringing in the pictures, but to think about, so for instance, my books are very, very wordy. Like, I love writing dialogue, like endless dialogue. And I have very chatty characters, and also lots of inner thoughts. You know, I have a lot of like, what are the dragons feeling at every given moment? And so to see that switch to a graphic novel, I will admit, when I get the manuscript, I do spend a lot of time trying to like add all my words back in. Because I'm like, but they're all important, every single line of dialogue. We can have more thought bubbles. But then it's like watching it laid out. I think I'm getting better at not doing that, because when I see it all laid out, I can be like, oh, Mike can convey so much with just an expression. You know, I'm like, that was like 3 pages of Clay having feelings, and here he's doing it all with one face, and it's so great. And it also, like, I notice when I'm doing the reading of the books with my kids, when we read graphic novels together, I can pause and be like, so there was just a line of dialogue there, but what do you think these two characters are feeling just from the context and their faces? And it's very like applicable to real life, you know, to be like, because you don't get to hear everybody's thoughts unless they're mine, because I share mine all the time. But for the most part, you don't get to hear what everyone's thinking, and you have to kind of figure it out from visual cues. And I think it's actually it's just one of the things I love about graphic novels in general, is like is that ability, that sort of like opening to talk to your kids about like what's really going on here, and like how would you feel, you know, what do you think they're feeling, and how is it different from what you'd feel? Anyway, so I'm very amazed. I'm always, I mean, I know they're dragons, but they still have really great facial expressions because Mike is so good at this. And yeah, and so just seeing like, how different it is to tell a story in those two different ways has been really, I feel like I've learned a lot.
Definitely. And then Lauren, you have your part that you want to add?
I think for me, you know, again, everything that everyone said, except for I don't get to draw them. But for me, you know, Andy had mentioned that when he was younger, he wasn't a reader, and neither was I. I was very overwhelmed. I had the same problem. So I could never, my friends were always talking about these amazing characters and topics, and I would pretend that I had read Charlotte's Web or, you know, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but I could never make my way through those books. So for me, one of the most satisfying thing for me about I Survived is that so many reluctant and struggling readers read the books. So many kids who are from other countries read the books. And so the fact that with graphic novels, it's another way for kids who aren't readers to access the book. So for me, my favorite part, you know, I was on a little class Zoom yesterday with this teacher friend of mine, and it was all kids who were very struggling readers. And they under kind of to Tui's point, they were reading the graphic novel of Titanic, and they understood so much about this event, and they were able to infer so much about the characters from the amazing pictures. So the fact that I'm able to kind of to help these kids engage with these topics, and that the graphic novels allow even, you know, a whole other group to engage in the stories through the graphic novels. And then also, I think a lot of them said, now I never thought I could read the book, but now I'm going to go and I'm going to read the other book. So they become these companions. So I think that's my favorite part.
I have a
Yeah, it
secret
is.
plot that I'm hoping the kids will read the graphic novels and then get frustrated because the next one's not out yet and have to go read the long books.
Yeah, I think they are. I do think that's what I'm hearing from a lot of my teacher and librarian friends, that they are surprisingly kind of companions.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I definitely see that from both of your books in bookstores as well. And then one last question before we hand it over to audience questions, which is exciting. So audience, get your questions in. What advice would you give to a young reader who wants to be a graphic novelist when they grow up? Anybody have anything they want to add about that?
I guess I can say, so I love to draw. That was what I love to do. So if you love to draw, you are on your way to becoming a graphic novelist. If you're a writer, as we can see here with our panelists, you can still become a graphic novelist. But for me, the thing that was so exciting about, there actually weren't a lot of graphic novels when I was, growing up. So, but I read a lot of comic books. And I read a lot of comic strips, and like Calvin and Hobbes was one of my favorites. And the thing is that I loved the visual language. I mean, and that is the thing that is interesting. And I think it's one of the things that's overlooked is the fact that graphic novels are actually two languages at once. There's a visual language, and then there's the written language, right? So this idea that a graphic novel is less than a book is really distorted, because I've actually met people that can't read comics. They just don't understand that language. And I think that that's something, as a kid, I was exposed to it. My mom read the Sunday Funnies to me, and I read children's books. Children's books are basically comics too, like every page is a panel. But I think that the most exciting thing is that understanding that it is a language, that it's not something to be ashamed of. It's something that's actually incredibly valuable. And I think that if you love that language, if you love the visual language of art and comics, then you are that's what you need to do to really be good at being a graphic novelist, because you're learning things just by looking and reading. You are learning all kinds of stuff. And yeah, don't be afraid to just draw it, just copy, just do whatever. It took me years until I decided to do my own comics. And when I actually sat down, I realized I knew how to do it because I had been studying all this time, and I didn't even know it. So yeah, don't be afraid, and don't be ashamed to love graphic novels and comic books, because it's really valuable. So.
Anybody
One thing
else?
I want to add to what, I was going to add to what Andy said. It's kind of interesting right now. We're more of a visual society than we've ever been. I mean, how many emails can you send without an emoji? How many times can you talk to someone where they're not like, wait, look, I have it on my Instagram, or like, here's a photo. So we are more than ever used to this idea of a visual language. And I think common advice is, write a lot and draw a lot, which I agree with. And also, this idea that, and this is really my not enough self speaking, to tell your inner critic that you notice they're there, and just ask them to sit down and be quiet while you're working, because every drawing leads to another drawing, every writing leads to another writing. And it's practice, and you just keep getting better, and you keep learning more about yourself. And one last thing, there's two books that I love about comics. One is, they're both called Making Comics. One is Making Comics, Scott McCloud, and then Making Comics, Linda Berry. And Linda Berry's is especially beautiful and amazing because these are all her students' work. I think some of them she fished out of a garbage can. So it's all about process and learning, and it's fun. I think the most important thing really is to have fun, because I love to draw and I love to write, and I have the most fun doing those things.
Yeah, and don't judge your stuff based on the things that we've spent hours and hours and hours doing. I mean, look at the process that we described. I mean, to sit down and think that you can create that it is deceptive, because you can read graphic novels so easy. You're like, this is easy, I can do this. And then you sit down, you're like, oh my gosh. And I will say, I've done lots of different jobs and lots of different art jobs. Graphic novels and comics are one of the hardest things that I have ever done. And it's actually one of the reasons that I was drawn to it, because of the challenge. It is a puzzle. There are so many things that you've got to make work right. And the saddest thing about it is when you make it work right, it's invisible. It is absolutely invisible to anybody. They can just read right through it, and you don't realize all the stuff that has to happen until you try to create it. And when you do, you can get so frustrated, but you just got to keep at it, because you can do it. Don't let that critic silence you. So.
Anybody have anything else they want to add for advice for kids?
I will add something that that Shannon often says, and she will encourage folks trying graphic novels to start small. That it's really intimidating to try to approach a big 200-page graphic novel to think you can do this big, humongous thing. But you could also do a 4-page comic, a 4-panel comic, and to work on that, building up your stamina. And as you're doing that, you're practicing your writing, you're practicing your art. You have all these different places to put it, with webcomics, even Instagram, right? And sharing it with family and friends. And it doesn't have to be this big, humongous thing at first. It could be this very small thing that you work your way up to.
I'll just add to that, Varian, because Shannon, I just had the total delight of being able to work with her on another thing that I create a magazine called Storyworks, which is a magazine that is read by lots of kids in their classrooms. And Shannon actually illustrated this beautiful poem. We had the idea of making a graphic poem. So it was this wonderful poem about how your emotions sometimes are like the weather. And it was this simple poem. And we thought, let's have her interpret this as a graphic piece. And it made me think just what you guys are saying about how starting small, because I thought, what a wonderful thing for someone who might want to do graphic novels to try to take a poem, take something you love, or like Andy, a note to your mom, and turn it into turn it into something. And I think Tui and I would say the same is true for writing, even if you don't want to do graphic novels, for any writing, of starting small, and taking a small idea and practicing, describing what's out your window, or describing in a funny thing that happened with you and your cat. So yeah, but I'll have to send you her beautiful, I wish I could show you the beautiful poem it just turned out.
I would love to see it. Thank you.
And then, Tui, do you want to add anything, or should we move on to audience questions?
I want to make sure we get to the audience questions.
Oh, yeah, let's do audience questions then. Yeah.
And everyone had great answers. So,
Hannah, do you want to?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much, everybody. Wonderful conversation. We do have a few great questions. And this one I know was on Rachel's list. So, but this is from an audience member, from Erin. And she comments that Andy's remarks are a nice segue into my question. Do any of you ever have to deal with the occasional parent who thinks graphic novels aren't real books? I know that's a problem for booksellers, but have you all ever experienced that?
Yeah, I'll just say something real quick. So this is the first little comic I ever did of OWLY. It's just a little 8.5 by 11. This is a starting small kind of thing, right? And there's no words at all. And one of my first interactions with this comic was I was at a little comic show, and I had this on a table, and a teacher picked it up, and she was like, oh, no. Yeah, she was a teacher, and she picked it up and she looked at it and she opened it and she went, no words, and she just closed it and she walked away. And it was so heartbreaking. But the thing was, is that there is a barrier there. I mean, and this was a story, and she basically just closed her mind to it, right? And I think the important thing to understand is that these are stories. This is us communicating our emotions and our feelings and our thoughts in a medium that is different than some parents may be familiar with, and I think that it is a challenge, but you have to kind of say and it's hard to challenge a parent to say, hey, slow down, and your kid loves this. Take the time to really look at it and read it with them. And once they read any graphic novel, I think that they can see the value in it. I think a lot of times it's one of those things, growing up, being a struggling reader, not being able to hit those big books and realizing how many times that, I felt so small because I considered what I read to be for kids, for little kids, right? and not for adults. And if you wanted to read big books, that was what you need to do. But yeah, it's hard, but I think it's a lot of misunderstanding. And I think that you just have to take a chance to explain it to them that this is another language that they've got to learn, and it's valuable. So
just to add on to what Andy's saying, sorry, I did it twice. I can't believe how many parents write to me and say their kid was a reluctant reader. And my book, they loved the book because they wouldn't put it down. And that to me is everything. And I think for me too, having so much humor in the books, kids love to read them over and over and over again, because each time there's another little Easter egg. So it's not something bad, it's a bonus. So in addition to having a story, in addition to having words, now you have visual literacy, you have details, you have humor, you have all sorts of extra things that you can go back and look at over and over again. And certainly empathy, because so many kids have written and said, I felt just like Natalie did. And when you can look at a character's face and see their expression, I think kids especially really connect with that. Because I mean, when I was a little kid, I, believed in Snoopy, and that those characters were real. They still are to me. So to be able to see their expression, I mean, I'll never forget bawling my eyes out at, Snoopy Come Home, right? So
gosh,
I think I still will actually cry at that. But to have this idea of a connection, and then to have the bonus of having words and reading and feeling successful as a reader, I think is tremendous.
And I just wanted to add, because Andy said something briefly about reading it with them, that actually they are some of the best bedtime reading that we do, because I read to both of my kids every night. And if we're doing a graphic novel, we'll each get assigned a character, and it's almost like reading theater. And I have very theatrical kids, I will admit. But it's been so much fun to watch them like use different voices and like try to make their character like the funniest one on the page, and we just take turns and get very invested in like what our character feels, and it opens up a lot of conversations. Like, so I would not count them out as bedtime reading either. I think they're really good for making the kid participate. Like, it's a good way to like get them reading along with you.
I want to add, I know everyone's piling on. I want to add something I think is really important. And I think often when I encounter a parent who says that, I go kind of the path of least resistance, and I talk about, being a reluctant reader, or using these as a springboard to encourage reading. And I think that's really, really important. But I also think that kind of diminishes a couple of things. I think, what's wrong with reading a graphic novel just because you enjoy the medium? And I want to tell parents, and depending on the parent, I'll say, well, you wouldn't deny a kid from doing this thing because they really like it. Like, why are you punishing your child? Don't punish your child for loving to read and loving to read this thing. They are doing it because they willingly want to do it. I mean, that's a great thing. And yes, all the studies say that it will lead to more reading, different types of books. All the studies say that their brain is working with, visual literacy and the language as well too, but also they just really like it, and like, don't deny them this thing that they really love to do.
Exactly. Yeah, I took a whole class on it, and that was basically the rundown right there. So we do have a few questions that are going to be recommendations. So those who are watching, get your pencils, because I was the one behind the scenes, and I won't have time to find all of them for you on
I'm trying to find them.
Get ready to write things down. But before we do that, Tui, there was a question specifically for you, wondering if there was going to be a movie for Wings of Fire. I don't know if you can say yes or no, but that question was thrown out there.
I actually can, because we had a big announcement actually in March, which is funny. It was like, big announcement, and then shut the country down. Nobody talked about anything for 9 months. So, yes, Wings of Fire was optioned by Warner Brothers and Ava DuVernay to turn into a TV show, which is so exciting because she's amazing. The other showrunners that are working on it are just the loveliest people, and I'm very excited. So it's, I always say it's like a 20-step process, and we were on step 2 for a long time, and now we're on step like 4 or 5. So there's still lots of things that have to happen. Like, we have to find a place that wants to produce it, and and then script writing and casting, and I don't know. I know that the Hollywood thing is a lot more complicated than I can wrap my head around, but this is a really big step, and I'm just so honored and excited at the people involved in it. And the hope is, that it would be a TV show eventually. Yeah, and so I will keep you posted when I know anything. Everyone's in their houses doing their own different things right now, so we'll see what happens.
Well, congrats and fingers crossed.
Yay.
it comes out.
Excited.
All right, so on to the next 3 questions, which are more like recommendations. I'm going to try to kind of combine them. They're from an anonymous attendee, so no name on these ones. But let's see. Let's start with this one. Oh my gosh, I can't form questions. One of the questions is what writers or illustrators inspired you as kids, and who's inspiring you now, which kind of goes into the, do you have recommendations for graphic novels? So I'll combine 2 questions in that one. Should I start with Lauren?
Well, I'm a huge fan of all of these people here. In fact, I didn't tell, you don't know this, but for Halloween this year, we have this close neighborhood. So I was actually able to get copies of Tui's book, Maria's book, Varian's, and Andy's. And we left that was our, some of them, I got some advance copies for this. And then I bought some others because I knew the other kids would have really loved them. And it really was, I have to be honest, my first, because I'm new to graphic novels myself. I mean, this process has introduced me. So I was just so, I was so dazzled by all of your work, and the whole neighborhood was kind of up, they were not upset at all they did get a little candy with them. So I definitely recommend these books. Maria, yours are hilarious. Tui's, I love your novels, as you know, and I just loved how they were translated into graphic novel. Varian, I've loved The Parker Inheritance for so long, and I thought Twins is spectacular. And Andy, yours are just so adorable.
Oh, thanks.
So I would just really recommend all of these people here.
Varian?
I feel like I'm starstruck. Thank you so much, Lauren. I really appreciate that. I think we all appreciate that. Growing up, I really loved Walter D. Myers and Virginia Hamilton, I will say, and they really put me on the path to being a writer because they were some of the first writers I saw who looked like me, who were writing books about people who looked like me. It kind of put it all together and put me on this track. As far as graphic novels, I love so many of them, and I could like go on for an hour naming them. I feel like most of us owe a big debt to Raina Telgemeier. Raina really paved the way for graphic novels for the younger set with both her adaptations of The Babysitter's Club and then her own Raina-inspired books and other books too, like Drama and Ghost. I will say I love Mariko Tamaki's work and Jillian Tamaki's work. They are amazing. I know they do projects separately, but when they come together, it is just some of the best work I have ever seen. Like this one, Summer, is easily one of my top 5, maybe top 2 favorite graphic novels ever.
Thank you. Maria?
So when I was growing up, there weren't a lot of graphic novels around, but I would read the funny pages start to finish, every single one. I was a huge Garfield fan and a huge Peanuts fan and a huge Calvin and Hobbes fan and Far Side. And I also really loved Shel Silverstein. And although this isn't so this is the actual original copy I had when I was a kid of Lafcadio the Lion. But what I really loved is the integration of words and pictures in this and his poetry books, and the fact that he was so funny. So that was really a foundation of childhood. And then as far as graphic novels, I have a couple suggestions. I really love El Defo by C.C. Bell. And then recently, 2 that have come out that I really like, The Phantom Twin by Lisa Brown and Witches, the adaptation by Penelope Baggio, if I said her last name correctly. But so those are, and again, there are so many favorites, so it's hard to say favorite, but these 3, when you said it earlier, these 3 popped to mind. So
very nice. Andy, I saw you grabbing some.
Well, the funny thing is that there's so many modern graphic novels. There's just incredible, but this is actually a collection of early Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comics. This is like from the 80s. But the thing about these is that they were black and white. And I know that is sometimes as a kid, it looks kind of boring. But for me as a kid, I saw that and was like, oh, I understand how this is created. This is black and white. It's ink. And it's, you know, sometimes when you see stuff that is so polished, like some of the stuff that I grew up with, the Disney movies and things where, you know, hundreds of people worked on those to create these incredible visuals. But as a kid, when you're trying to create that yourself, you're judging it based on that, right? And so for me, one of the hardest things to draw for me as a kid, and still, are human beings. I don't like drawing humans. I just don't. I can always tell that it just doesn't quite look right. And so I always gravitated towards animals. And so that was one of the reasons I loved Dumbo, and I loved all of the Disney movies, and I loved Calvin and Hobbes because so much of it is Hobbes the tiger. But the thing about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was that it was very few humans in it. And I could draw the turtles. And I think the thing is that when you can find something that you can actually create, it takes it to a whole nother level. And then what happened was I got out of comics for a while. And when I was working in a cubicle, one of my neighbor, her kids loved Pokemon, and I hadn't really gotten into Pokemon. I didn't even watch it. But the first Pokemon movies, they had these little shorts at the beginning that were just the Pokemon. So there's no humans involved. It's just the Pokemon hanging around and talking and playing, and none of them speak English, right? And I was like, that's the world. That's the world that I want to create, you know? And it was just like Snoopy Come Home. It was Snoopy and Woodstock without all of the Peanuts characters. It was, you know, and so everybody's got to find that little thing that they connect with. So for me, it was the fewer humans, the better. So.
So for me, same. I didn't have really graphic novels growing up, and in fact, we grew up overseas. Like I grew up in South America, so we didn't even really have comics, funny pages, or like a comic story down the street. Which I feel like I would have been a slightly different child if I had. Like I would have been all over that basically. And I think what first got me started reading comics at all was when my favorite TV show, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, ended, and then they continued the story in comics. So I was like, here I am, hand them over. I want to know what happened. But then, especially because of the kids, I've been exposed to a lot of amazing graphic novels, and probably one of my favorite of all time is Nimona by Noelle Stevenson. I love this book so much. I reread it all the time. It actually has a very Buffy sort of sense of humor, and it's also just wonderful, and I love it. And then some more recent ones that I feel like have a similar sense of humor and sort of quirkiness that I love are the Space Battle Lunchtime series. There's 3 of them now. I know there's a 3rd one. I was so excited when I discovered that, by Natalie Rice. And then Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell. This is just like a happy standalone story that just filled me with joy. And then Jen Wang with The Prince and the Dressmaker, and also her book Stargazing, which is more recent. I love her art, and I just want to like live in these stories. I think they're just beautiful. So those are some of my recent favorites. And the Amulet books by Kazuki Kibuishi are also a very big hit around here. We're kind of obsessed with them. So
those are great. I read a lot of graphic novels, and one of my favorites right now is Snapdragon by Kat Lee? Sorry, I haven't said her name out loud. But that's one of my favorites right now, Snapdragon, and it's wonderful. Rachel, do you have any recommendations as a bookseller on the floor every day?
Tea Dragon Society.
Oh yes. Oh, they're so cute.
And then I'm trying to think what else. I think it's Spinning, I want to say. It's about a laundromat.
Oh yeah.
Wait, Sheets. Are you talking about
That's
Sheets?
Sheets.
Sorry, Sheets, yes.
Yeah.
Spinning is good too.
Spinning is great. Spinning is
because I was
great.
gonna
Tilly
say-
Walden.
Yeah,
Tilly Walden.
The other one I wanted to mention is On a Sunbeam by Tilly Walden. That's her, like, it's like a long, like thick space opera epic, and it's also fantastic. Like I think one of the questions was, what's getting you through the pandemic? That one will last you a little while, because it's like it's thick, but it's really good.
I also wanted to just, of course, add Jerry Craft's book, New Kid, which
And Class Act.
And Class Act.
so much.
Yep.
Your favorites too. Definitely a librarian favorite. That one's on the recommendation list a lot. Along with twins, Varian. I've gotten a lot of librarians asking for your book, so
Thank you.
that's one of my favorite questions to ask. So I'm glad we got it. And we did get one more that is for Lauren, and I actually wrote down this question for myself as well, so I'm glad someone else asked it. But they have a question about your research process for the Survived books, and they want you to dive deep into it. My question would have been, how do you stop yourself from going into a research hole? Because that's what I would do as a history lover.
It's definitely hard. Well, as I said, usually I've traveled to every single place that I've written about in the 20 books, except for I did not go to 2.5 miles down to the bottom of the North Atlantic to see the wreckage of the Titanic. And I didn't get to go to Japan to research the tsunami because it was just too far, and I wasn't able to manage that. But going to a place and really walking in the footsteps of your characters, and then having that whole world in your mind, whether it's looking up at Mount Vesuvius from Pompeii or standing on Gettysburg, the battlefields of Gettysburg. It's just that's a very powerful experience. And then, I think for me also talking to people who have some connection to the event. If it's a modern event, obviously it's people who have been through it. And one of the very striking parts of the experience of writing the series for me is that I get a lot of emails and letters from people who've been through natural disasters, and often they invite me to come to their communities to hear stories, to hear their stories. And I do that. I've done that quite a few times, and sometimes they turn into I Survived books. Other times, they're just to go. And that is that research process where you really, that was my wildfire book, where I went to Paradise at the invitation of this wonderful family, the Fishers. He was a firefighter. They lost, this town, Paradise, where they grew up, 90% of the town was destroyed. So being in the midst, that's definitely the most incredible part of the research process. But there are many, many, many tributaries that you can go down, especially when you're procrastinating writing. Like, oh yes, I need to find out, like I went through this whole wormhole of just learning about the game of marbles because it was very popular during the early 1900s. So I thought there's like a marble museum, and there's all these antique marbles on eBay, and it's like there's a marbles expert in a museum. So that was like an entire week, and I ended up not doing marbles at all. So.
That's one line in the book. Then the marbles were popular.
2 weeks, one line.
Oh, yeah, so.
Thank you. Paradise is really close to us here in the Bay Area, so I'm sure a lot of people here are going to be picking that book up. And I grew up in Houston, Texas, and my family lives in Galveston. I went through many of hurricanes there.
Yeah.
So I always love seeing your books and being like, oh, I was obsessed with that. I am a huge history buff, so I'm so excited to see the graphic novel versions come through. We are a little over time, but I do want to ask this question for everybody. The last question is, what's coming next for all of you, graphic novels or otherwise? So we'll start with Varian.
I'm trying to figure out what I can talk about. I think I have I think I have a book coming out in the fall. I'm not 100% positive, but I think I have a book coming out in the fall. It will be a prose novel. It'll be about a kid who loves to play cards.
Very nice, thank you. Andy?
Well, the OWLY series, book 3 is already done, and that'll be out. I think it comes out in April. I'm not sure, but of next year. And then I'm working on the 4th one, and so that one will be out, I guess, fall of next year. And hopefully by that point we can all see each other, and we'll be out touring and things. But who knows? But then after that, I've got 2 more. So just keep working on them and. But yeah, it's good. It's getting me through. Keeping on deadlines is what's getting me through the pandemic, So.
Yeah. Great, Maria.
Keeping through deadlines is what's getting me through the pandemic, also. So I just finished finished up. I still have a round of final tweaks for Absolutely Nat, which is Nat Book 3, which is coming out in August, and then I'm going to roll right into Nat Book 4. And other than that, my daily comic I still work on every day, so that's out there too, half full.
I love that title, Absolutely Nat. That's great.
There's a lot of puns. I mean, I've looked and there's a lot. Like I've got a whole thing.
Whole series worth of puns. Tui?
So we have already finished is the 4th graphic novel, which is December 29th, and then the 14th book in the regular series, which is March 2nd. And I'm working on we've done the script of the 5th graphic novel, so that's in progress. I'm allegedly working on book 15. I mean, to my editor, I'm definitely working on book 15. That's due in March, I think. So totally happening right now.
You're deep in book 15. You're deep in it. You're deep.
I am. It's almost done, I'm sure, in my head. But my children are home all the time doing remote school, so there's a lot of that happening. And then we have a like Wings of Fire sort of like workbook. It's called Forge Your Own Dragon World coming, which is it's really cute. It's a little bit like Raina Telgemeier's like Share Your Smile, if you've seen that one, where it's sort of like ways to create your own like dragon character or world or stuff like that. So it's fun. And then the other thing we're working on is like a giant guide to the world, sort of like the world of Pantala and Pyrea. So those are the things I'm working on when I can. And then I have something else I really want to write, and I just have to figure out when to fit it in. So.
Moving things around. All right, Lauren.
Well, the Nazi invasion, I Survived the Nazi Invasion comes out in February. We're working right now on the I Survived 9/11 book, which will be coming out in the next fall. And that we're just beginning to work. Georgia just did the adaptation of the I Survived the Attack of the Grizzlies, sort of. But actually, and then I'm working on the Galveston book. But one of the things I haven't shared is that I did my first picture book, which I didn't, my friend who's an artist and I collaborated, and it's coming out in the fall, and it's called Only My Dog Knows I Pick My Nose. And it's about all the things about us that our dogs, our true selves. So that's been really, really, really fun, especially as a counterpoint to like the Nazi invasion.
Yeah.
That's what I'd rather work on right now. So yeah.
Very nice. Well, you all seem very busy. So thank you so much for joining us for this panel. And thank you to our attendees for stopping by. We did record, and we'll have this up on our YouTube channel with many of our other shelter in place events that have taken place virtually. You can find a lot of them there. Thank you so much, everyone, on this panel.
Thank you so much,
Maria,
everyone.
Varian,
Absolutely.
Andy, Tui, Lauren, Rachel, thank you for joining us from your living room instead of in the bookstore. We appreciate you all, and I hope you all have a great evening for those of you not on the West Coast. And a great afternoon for those of you who are in sunny California.
Cutie.
Say hello to all the puppies. I think there are like at
I
least
know.
3 on
Is it
this
time?
call.
Yeah. It's time, Toby.
Someone's gonna
He's
go
been
sneak a
waiting. He's been
puppy.
sitting here whining the whole time, saying, "When's my chance?"
Perfect.
My little guy's finally asleep and it's
Oh,
over.
right,
So
after all that.
Well, thank you so much, and I hope you all have a wonderful day, and that we see you in person soon, and everybody has a healthy and happy holiday season. Thank you for helping us end our event season.
thank you guys.
Yeah,
Happy
thank
New Year for
you.
everyone.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.